Now that Sundered Doctrine's been out for a few days, I've had the chance to study and optimize strategies for each encounter in the new dungeon, and compile a list of 7 tips and tricks that will help make your clears as painless as possible. We've done this for several other dungeons in the past, and it's always one of the most highly requested videos on the channel, so if you enjoy this type of content, a like and subscription would be greatly appreciated. Now without wasting any more of your time, let's get into it. Tip number 1 takes us to the first encounter, and this one is all about the most optimal lens pathing for each room. During the first 2 phases, you can pretty much use common sense and complete these connections without any major blockers. This is not the case for phase 3, however, but we'll be diving into that more in a moment. All these rooms can be completed with just 2 lenses, with the exception of R1, which requires a minimum of 3. For L1, it takes just 2 connections from the left lens to light up the symbol on the wall in the leftmost room. The middle lens can reach this room as well, but will require an additional connection. For L2, it takes 2 connections from both the left and middle lenses to complete these chains, and the same can be said for R2, which can use the right and middle lenses to reach the symbol in just 2 connections as well. R1 is the only room that requires 3 connections, and the most optimal path is actually directly downwards, then through this wall to the 3rd lens to complete the chain. Knowing these paths will limit the number of subjugators you need to kill, which significantly speeds up this encounter. My only other piece of advice here would be to hold off on dunking lenses until your team is on the same page about which path is being used, as pre-placing lenses in the wrong spot can waste time and cause unnecessary frustration for you and your fire team. Moving on to tip number 2, this one's all about understanding phase 3. There are several rules to keep in mind here, all of which prevent dead-end connections when trying to complete the 3rd and final chain during this phase. The first rule to keep in mind is that the right lens does not have the ability to connect to the rooms on the left side of this encounter. I've tested this extensively myself, and this infographic made by Reddit user Kenshi confirms this as well. You'll notice there are 0 connections leading from right to left. It's also worth noting that the left lens actually has the ability to reach all 4 rooms without interfering with any other lens paths, which makes it the absolute MVP of this encounter. So what does this mean? At a high level, if phase 3 starts with a room on the right hand side, you should always use the right lens first. And no matter what the starting room is, always save the left lens for last. Let's give a visual example to showcase this. Let's say phase 3 starts with R2. A lot of people may start by using the middle lens here and connect these 2 lamps to light up the symbol. But let's say the next 2 rooms are both on the left hand side of the encounter. All of a sudden, because the middle lens has already been used, the right lens can't connect to either of those rooms, and you now have a combination that will force you to restart this portion of the encounter. When done correctly, you would start with the right lens leading to R2, the middle lens leading to L2, and the left lens leading to L1. These 2 rules will prevent any potential blockers that this encounter could possibly throw at you, making it much more enjoyable. For tip number 3, we're headed to the first boss and everyone's favorite encounter, the Zoetic Lockset. This tip is all about the best symbols to use when setting up your damage, and I want to give a massive shout out to ATP for providing further clarity on this mechanic. If you haven't already, I highly recommend watching his video after you're done with this one, which will be linked down in the description below. Now, there's a lot of misinformation going around about what these symbols actually do, and I'll leave the extended version to ATP, but to put it simply, you always want to lock your symbols on stop, 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 and kill in order from right to left. Stop will temporarily pause ad spawns while kill starts damage, so the more stops we have back to back, the longer the pause in ad spawns, which makes your damage phase much less chaotic. Tip number 4 is similar to our previous tip, but this one's actually about babysitting the symbols prior to DPS, now that we know which symbols we're looking for. As the boss goes through its Lockset progression, you'll manipulate these wheels to read stop, 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 and kill, as I mentioned earlier. However, just because you've changed these to stop doesn't mean they'll remain on stop prior to damage. As the boss is locking these symbols in place, it actually has the potential to shift the dial placements by one spot in the direction the wheel is turning, which can significantly impact the events that take place both prior to and during damage. In this example, I had already locked in stop on wheel number 4, but as the progressions were taking place on other wheels, it had actually shifted one place to the right and landed on Hive, which was causing Hive Ogres to spawn. This is why it's important to continuously double check your work after changing the symbols to stop to avoid unwanted modifiers throughout the encounter. Moving on to tip number 5, this one's all about DPS. There are a lot of conversations about the best damage options for this boss, but I have a few strategies you guys can use to help achieve a comfortable 2-phase, if not a clean 1-phase with the right setups. First up, Anarchy absolutely destroys this boss. This weapon allows you to have 6 mines actively ticking at any given time, which is perfect for the Zoetic Lockset, as we can stick each Shrieker with a mine, while sticking an additional mine between each set of Shriekers to maximize the tick damage on each one. You can then pair this with something like Mountaintop that does non-crit damage until the mines expire, and reapply Anarchy throughout the fight. At the time of this recording, crit multipliers are currently broken with this boss, which means that weapons like Queensbreaker, Sleeper, and Whisper are all extremely weak for the time being. If you don't have Anarchy, Le Monarch is doing some disgusting things to this boss right now thanks to its damage over time building up rapid bolt charge, while Thunderlord can be used to consistently proc bolt charge as well. The ideal damage setup would be at least one Thundercrash Titan with Cures of the Falling Star, as T-Crash can actually damage 2 Shriekers at once as long as you aim inside of the eyes between 2 of them. I also recommend one Well of Radiance for safety during damage, with the 3rd member of your fire team having freedom to choose between a second Thundercrash, Chaos Reach, or Gathering Storm. I also recommend having your Titan throw the small wall prior to damage to help you rapidly build bolt charge with Anarchy, which helps cook damage even further, making this a relatively free 1-phase. Tip number 6 takes us to the final boss encounter, Care of the Erased. Getting to damage here is relatively easy, but dealing damage can be unbelievably annoying thanks to the boss's slam attacks, strand pulling shenanigans, and occasional hiding behind pillars. But I actually have an insane DPS location that avoids all of this. This elevated ledge located on the close left-hand side of the encounter not only shields you from the solar attack that burns off the boss's shield, but it also prevents the boss from ever using his strand or slam attacks, while also giving you clean sight lines over the far side of the room. This means you're free to toss down a well, throw a shield behind you for bolt charge, and go to town on this boss. For damage, I recommend 2 Queensbreakers with the new Catalyst that can be obtained from Crucible private matches, and a Divinity to absolutely cook this boss, though any linear fusion rifle utilizing particle deconstruction will do just fine here. But regardless of what you're using, this location is an absolute game changer for damage. The 7th and final tip is a quick one, but is important nonetheless. I'm sure we're all familiar with these annoying ass doors in the latter half of the dungeon, and I want to let you know that I share your pain. So here's a tip to make these a little less annoying. No matter what weapon you're using, make sure you're always shooting the front of these doors to open them. The inside of the doors will do nothing to keep them open, so make sure you're always shooting the flat front surface instead. Despite this, most weapons are still astonishingly bad at doing this, so much so that I actually swapped to a fusion rifle to open these doors quickly in the final boss encounter. I'm not normally a huge fusion guy, but they've become my best friend for opening these doors and maintaining my sanity. And that's it! 7 tips to help you guys farm the brand new Sundered Doctrine dungeon as quickly and painlessly as possible. If you guys have any other tips to share, be sure to leave a comment down below to get as many useful strategies out in the wild as possible. And if you found this guide useful, a like and subscription is always greatly appreciated. You can catch me doing dungeon helps live over at twitch.tv/above, and I'd love to see you guys in the live stream sometime. Anyways, that's it from me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Peace!